They say that at every concert, every game, there's a camera that no one controls. It has no operator, no director. It's a ghost in the machine, and its lens is a loaded gun. They call it the kiss cam. But its true purpose isn't to capture love. It's to hunt for betrayal. The legend was born in the guts of a place like this. A cold, dark room smelling of ozone and stale coffee, hidden high above the roaring crowds. It was a place of unseen power, a nest of cables and monitors from which the spectacle of public joy was manufactured. And it was here, in 2017, that Elijah Mason learned that joy was a lie. Elijah wasn't a ghost then. He was a man in love, a technician, a maestro of the Jumbotron. His job was simple: find the happy people, pan the camera, frame the shot, and put their fleeting moments of affection on display for 20,000 strangers. He was good at it. He believed in it. He believed the smiles he captured were real, because his own smile, the one he wore thinking of his fiancée, was real. That night, the band was loud, the lights were blinding, and the energy of the stadium was electric. Elijah was scanning Section 304, his fingers dancing over the controls, searching for the perfect shot. A laugh, a shared whisper, a loving glance. And then he found it. A kiss. Passionate, spontaneous, undeniable. His breath hitched. The roar of the crowd dissolved into a low, deafening hum inside his headphones. The woman in the frame, the one whose lips were locked with a stranger's, was his fiancée. The ring he'd saved for a year for her was on her finger. He zoomed in, a nauseating lurch in his stomach. The camera didn't lie. The pixels were merciless. Something inside Elijah snapped. The professional, the showman, died. All that was left was the raw, screaming nerve of a man betrayed. With a single deliberate movement, he broke the first rule of his craft. He stopped hunting for joy and started broadcasting pain. His pain. He pushed the feed from his private monitor to the main Jumbotron. For 30 agonizing seconds, the entire stadium went silent, staring at the raw, unfiltered image of infidelity. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The show was ruined. A small riot broke out in Section 304. Elijah was fired before the last roadie had packed up his gear. He was sued by the venue, by the man in the video, even by her. The public humiliation was absolute. He became a pariah, a meme, a cautionary tale whispered among event crews. A week later, they found him. Not at his apartment, which had already been emptied by his landlord, but back in the place of his ruin, back in the control room. He had hanged himself with a camera cable. He was found by a cleaning crew, his body swaying gently in the air-conditioned breeze. And on the main monitor, the one he'd used to destroy his life, a single clip played on a loop. The kiss, his fiancée, the stranger, over and over. A digital ghost in an empty room. The police report called it a suicide, but the techs, the riggers, the ushers, they knew better. They knew it was the birth of a curse. Before he died, they said Elijah had whispered his final judgment into the cold, dead air of that room. A promise, a threat. Whoever betrays in the light of a kiss will die in the darkness. 2025. The Olympus Stadium. The band was Chroma, the biggest in the world. And in the best seats, insulated from the sweaty masses by corporate expense accounts and bulletproof glass, were Arthur Vance and Catherine Reed. He was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. She was his chief people officer, the architect of his corporate culture, the gatekeeper of his secrets, and, for the last 6 months, his lover.
They were careless because they were powerful. They believed their position, their intelligence, made them immune to consequence. Their affair was a high-wire act performed without a net, a thrilling little secret that made the sterile boardrooms and predictable stock reports bearable. Arthur had a wife and 2 children in a sprawling mansion in the suburbs. Catherine had a fiancé, a kind, unsuspecting software engineer. They were background characters in the epic Arthur and Catherine believed they were writing for themselves. Then came the kiss cam. It started as a joke, a cheesy, low-tech gimmick in a high-tech world. They watched on the screen, sipping their champagne, as the camera picked out unsuspecting couples in the crowd. A teenage couple blushing furiously, an elderly pair kissing with the gentle comfort of a lifetime together. It was quaint, harmless. Arthur even let out a condescending chuckle. Then the red light of the camera swiveled toward their box. A playful, heart-shaped graphic materialized around them on the Jumbotron. For a split second, their laughing faces filled the screen, visible to 20,000 people. Then the smiles evaporated, as if they'd been wiped clean. The blood drained from Catherine's face. Arthur's champagne flute stopped halfway to his lips. They were caught, publicly, irrefutably. Catherine's reaction was pure, primal fear. She recoiled, pulling her hand from his as if his touch was suddenly radioactive. She tried to shrink into the plush seat, to become invisible. But Arthur was different. For a nanosecond, he froze. Then the CEO brain, the fixer brain that had navigated hostile takeovers and market crashes, kicked into overdrive. His mind wasn't on the ethics, the betrayal, or the woman next to him. It was on damage control. Kill the feed, now. His mind was a Rolodex of emergency contacts, spinning at light speed. The stadium's head of operations, his head of PR, his personal lawyer. He needed his phone. He lunged for his suit jacket draped over the chair, his movements clumsy and panicked. On the giant screen, the world didn't see a powerful CEO. They saw a guilty man, suddenly frantic, turning away from the woman beside him, desperately fumbling for something, for a way out. The image screamed guilt louder than any kiss ever could. It was too late. It had always been too late. The moment lasted only 10 seconds, but 10 seconds is an eternity in the digital age. Thousands of phones, held high like tiny digital pitchforks, had captured it all. The shared laugh, the moment of frozen horror, and most damningly, the panicked, guilty scramble. By the time the concert was over, the narrative was set. By the time they reached their separate cars, it was going viral. CEO and his chief people officer's panicked reaction to Kiss Cam. By morning, they were identified. Arthur Vance, CEO of Titan Tech, Catherine Reed, his CPO. The man with the perfect family, the woman with the unsuspecting fiancé, the architects of their own destruction. The fallout was a digital wildfire. The board called an emergency meeting. Arthur and Catherine were suspended pending an internal investigation, a corporate term for a public execution. Their spouses saw the clip. Their families saw it. The world saw it. In 12 hours, they had gone from masters of their universe to the internet's villains of the day. Hounded by the press, disowned by their families, and exiled from the company they had helped build, They did the only thing they could. They clung to each other. Their secret affair, now a public disgrace, became their only sanctuary. In a final act of defiance, they decided to be together, openly. They moved into a new place, a fortress in the sky, a penthouse on the 80th floor with biometric security and windows that looked down on the rest of the world. It was a place to hide, to regroup, to start over. A clean slate, paid for with the remnants of their old lives.
They believed the storm would pass. They believed they could outrun the scandal. That their shared future would be stronger than their shattered pasts. They stood in the center of their new, empty life, holding each other as the city glittered below, convinced they were safe.
They were wrong. The judgment of the living was over, but the judgment of the dead was just beginning. And in the digital heart of their new home, an old ghost was waking up. The first week was a slow-motion drowning in a sea of luxurious silence. Arthur and Catherine, once united by a stolen electric secret, were now shackled by a public, suffocating truth. They orbited each other in the vast expanse of the penthouse, their conversations reduced to hollow pleasantries about food they couldn't taste and a view they no longer saw. The fortress they had bought was not a home. It was a mausoleum for the lives they had just buried, and they were the first ghosts to haunt it. The first crack in their fragile reality came from the world they thought they'd muted. Arthur's phone buzzed with a news alert. It was a tabloid, featuring a telephoto picture of them from that very morning. The headline was a dagger. Disgraced CEO and lover hide out in skyscraper fortress. How? Catherine's voice was a wisp of air. The shell corporations, the NDAs, no one should know. It's a leak, Arthur snarled, the familiar fire of corporate warfare a temporary comfort. Someone on my legal team is getting a 9-figure lawsuit tomorrow. He spent the next 3 hours on the phone, a caged tiger, roaring threats and commands, firing people via encrypted text. He was trying to solve the problem the only way he knew how, with power and money. Catherine, however, just stared at the picture on his phone. The angle was wrong. It felt too high up, too watchful. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. This didn't feel like a human betrayal. It felt like they had been found. Arthur's rage left an angry silence in its wake, isolating him in his office. Alone in the cavernous living room, Catherine heard it. A faint sound carried on the sterile, conditioned air from the ceiling vents. At first she thought it was the wind, but it was rhythmic, a low, continuous murmur like thousands of people whispering at once. She walked into the kitchen. The sound followed, seeming to emanate from the vent above the refrigerator. She stood on a chair, pressing her ear to the cold metal grate. The sound became clearer. It was laughter. Faint, mocking, distant, the sound of the stadium. She stumbled back, a gasp escaping her lips. "Arthur!" she called out, her voice thin. He emerged from his office, his face a thundercloud. "What is it?" "The vents. I can hear people laughing." He paused, listened for a moment, and heard nothing but the gentle hum of the HVAC system. "Catherine," he said, his voice strained with impatience. "You're on edge. It's the building's acoustics. Get a grip." He retreated back into his office, leaving her alone with the phantom crowd that only she could hear. The seed of doubt that he thought she was losing her mind was planted. Annoyed and unconvinced, Arthur tried to ground himself in reality.
He switched on the financial channel. The world of numbers and predictable patterns had always been his sanctuary. He watched the stock ticker scroll, a familiar green and red ribbon of logic. Suddenly, it stuttered. The symbols for Apple, Google, and Amazon dissolved into a stream of corrupted text. CEO, HR, liars. Arthur sat bolt upright. He blinked, his heart starting to hammer. The ticker continued its horrifying crawl. Keys, Cam, Saw, You, Guilty, Shame. His mind screamed hacker. He grabbed the remote, killed the power to the entire media unit, and rebooted it. When the screen came back, the ticker was normal. He told himself it was a hallucination, a microsleep, a symptom of extreme stress. He was Arthur Vance. His mind was a fortress. He would not allow a crack to show. He decided, pointedly, not to mention this moment of weakness to Catherine.
That afternoon, Catherine's fragile composure snapped. As she passed the dark television, she glanced at her reflection and froze. He was there. The man from her nightmares. A hunched silhouette in a technician's jacket standing directly behind her in the polished black screen. He wasn't moving. He was just watching. The air left her lungs in a rush. The room tilted violently, the floor rising up to meet her as the world dissolved into blackness. She awoke moments later, the cold marble of the floor a shock to her cheek. She was disoriented, a dull ache throbbing in her temple. I must have fainted, she thought, her mind grasping for a rational explanation. Stress? Exhaustion? I'm not eating. The reflection? It must have been part of it, a bizarre dream as she lost consciousness. Shaken, she decided she needed to sleep. She dismissed the terror as a symptom, not a cause.
That very night, as Catherine forced herself into a fitful, dream-haunted sleep, the curse turned its attention back to Arthur. He was working late, trying to salvage his reputation when his personal phone rang. "Unknown," he answered, his voice sharp. "Vance." The reply was a deafening blast of static and the frantic repeated click, click, click of a camera shutter. It was aggressive, invasive. Arthur felt a surge of pure rage. "Who is this?" he yelled. The clicking stopped. A voice, layered and distorted as if spoken through a broken fan, whispered through the static. "Nice show." Arthur roared in frustration and hurled the phone against the wall, where it clattered to the floor, the screen shattering. The rational explanations were running out. This was targeted. This was personal. And it was happening right now. Catherine's fainting spell suddenly seemed much more sinister. The next evening, the haunting escalated from personal attacks to a full-blown siege. They were sitting in tense silence when the television switched itself on. The raw, unfiltered feed of their public shame filled the room. This time, there was no disbelief. Catherine let out a choked cry. Arthur didn't even bother with the remote. He strode to the wall and ripped the power cord out with a furious grunt. The screen went black, and then, impossibly, it flared back to life. They stared, mesmerized in horror. The clip played on, a silent, looping testament to their sin, powered by nothing but malice. All of Arthur's theories about hackers and stress evaporated. All of Catherine's self-doubt about her sanity vanished. This was real. This was happening. They weren't being pranked. They were being haunted. They backed away from the demonic screen together, two sets of frightened eyes fixed on the impossible, their individual fears finally merging into one shared, overwhelming terror. That night, they slept with the bedroom door locked, a flimsy defense against a threat that ignored walls. But the locks on Arthur's mind had been broken. He dreamed he was back at the stadium, his own panicked face on the jumbotron as a crowd of laughing shadows jeered him. He woke with a raw scream tearing from his throat, sitting bolt upright, drenched in sweat. "What is it?" Catherine gasped, grabbing his arm. "The dream," he panted, his voice trembling. "He was there. They were all laughing at me." For the first time since the scandal broke, the great Arthur Vance admitted he was afraid. But even in his terror, a part of him clung to a final thread of denial. "It was just a dream, Catherine. A nightmare."
His words, "just a dream," ignited something in Catherine. A desperate need to prove that their terror was real, that she wasn't just the hysterical woman he'd accused her of being. The next morning, she went to the security hub. She pulled up the logs for the living room, time-stamped to the exact moment of the TV incident. She watched the footage, saw the two of them, saw Arthur rip the cord from the wall, and then her heart stopped. There, in the corner of the room, standing partially behind a floor lamp, was a shape. A silent, motionless man in a technician's jacket. He hadn't been there when they were in the room, but he was there on the tape. A ghost captured on CCTV. She didn't scream. She didn't run. A chilling calm settled over her. She called Arthur into the room, her voice flat. "Look." He saw it. The blood drained from his face. Every argument, every rationalization, every logical explanation he had ever constructed turned to dust. It was over. The debate was over. They were being haunted, and here was the proof.
There was only one path left. They found the spiritualist, Eliza, through a hushed, desperate phone call. They sat before her in her cluttered, incense-filled apartment, their designer clothes looking absurdly out of place. They told her everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and exhaustion. Eliza listened, her shadowy form perfectly still. When they were finished, she spoke, her voice a grave whisper. "The curse of the technician," she said. "A spirit of profound public shame. His name was Elijah. He doesn't want money. He doesn't want revenge. He wants balance." "Balance?" Catherine asked. "He wants you to feel what he felt," Eliza clarified, her words falling like stones in the silent room. Leaving Eliza's apartment was like stepping out of a warm, candlelit tomb into a freezer. The knowledge she had given them was not a weapon. It was a diagnosis, a terminal one. Hope, they realized, was a luxury they no longer had. The curse was real. It had rules, and they were already caught in its grinding, merciless mechanism. The drive back to their penthouse was silent, each of them lost in a private hell, the psychic's grim words echoing in their minds. "He will not stop until your public shame is matched by an equal and terrible measure of private suffering."
Arthur broke first. The man who built an empire on order and logic succumbed to utter chaos. The whispers of the ghost were no longer just in his dreams. They were his constant companions. He began arguing with an empty room, his voice a raw bark of defiance. "It was a mistake!" he'd yell at the ceiling. "Do you hear me? A mistake!" In moments of quiet horror, he would claw at his own face, a desperate attempt to scratch away the phantom itch of the world's gaze, to peel off the mask of the man he used to be.
His descent culminated in a terrifying mural. Catherine came home from a solitary walk to find him on his knees, using her most expensive lipstick to draw the kiss cam's heart shape over and over again on the pristine white walls, the floor, the windows. He was creating a gallery of their guilt, each crude heart a scream of madness. "If he wants to see it," Arthur muttered, his voice a low growl, "I'll make sure it's all he can see."
Catherine's torment was quieter but deeper. Elijah was no longer just a fleeting glimpse. He was a permanent resident in her world of reflections. She looked at the polished steel of the refrigerator, and he was there. She glanced at the dark glass of the oven door, and he was there. The bathroom, with its wall-to-wall mirror, became a chamber of horrors. She would stand at the sink and see an army of Elijahs standing behind an army of her, their collective, silent judgment pressing in on her until she couldn't breathe.
One evening it became too much. Trapped in the bathroom, surrounded by his image, she finally shattered. She wasn't just being watched. She was being consumed. She grabbed a bar of soap and began scrubbing at her lips, violently, obsessively, as if to erase the memory of the kiss, to purify the source of her sin. She scrubbed until her mouth was raw, tears of terror and rage streaming down her face. "I won't kiss anymore," she shrieked at the silent figures in the glass, her voice hoarse and broken. "I won't kiss anyone. Is that what you want? Leave me alone!"
Her scream broke Arthur's fever. He rushed in to find her collapsed on the floor, weeping hysterically. Seeing her so completely broken, something in his own fractured mind solidified into a single, terrible idea. Elijah had said Elijah wanted them to feel what he felt: shame, humiliation, publicly. They couldn't hide from it. They had to return it. "Get up," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "We're going back. We're going to give him what he wants."
They drove through the sleeping city, two specters on a final, desperate pilgrimage. They returned to the Olympus Stadium. It was closed, locked, but a man with Arthur's resources could always find a way in. They stood on the massive stage, the empty seats rising around them like the tiers of a colosseum waiting for a sacrifice. The silence was absolute, a living thing that pressed in on them. "We're here, you bastard!" Arthur screamed into the void, his voice swallowed by the immense space. "You want your shame back? Take it!" As if in answer, the giant jumbotron flickered. A low hum filled the air, and the screen lit up, not with an image, but with a roaring blizzard of black and white static. The sound was deafening, a chorus of 1,000,000 whispering voices. A form began to coalesce from the digital chaos. It was Elijah. Not a man of flesh and blood, but a specter of corrupted data, his edges bleeding into the static, his headphones cracked, his face a void of infinite rage. His voice boomed from the speakers, not as a single voice, but as a legion. "You took my dignity," the static roared. "You made my pain a spectacle. Now you will become the show." The screen's light intensified, becoming a vortex of swirling energy that pulled at Catherine. She screamed as she was lifted from the stage, her body disintegrating into 1,000,000 tiny points of light, each a pixel in a new, horrific image. She was pulled into the screen,
her silent scream forever absorbed into the cursed signal.
For a horrifying moment, the looping clip of the kiss at the concert changed. Now a third figure was in it, Catherine's screaming, pixelated form, forever trapped between her past self and Arthur's, a ghost in her own memory.
Arthur watched, frozen in horror, as Catherine vanished. Before he could react, he heard a sound from above. From the dark rigging high overhead, thick camera cables began to slither down like black mechanical pythons.
One of the cables coiled around his neck, cold and tight. It jerked him upwards, lifting him off the stage, his feet kicking at the empty air.
As he struggled for breath, the stadium lights flared to life. He looked out, and the seats were no longer empty. They were filled with a phantom crowd. Thousands of laughing, jeering, applauding silhouettes, their faces turned towards him. They thought it was part of the show. They were pointing, taking pictures with phantom phones, cheering for his final public humiliation. His private suffering had become their entertainment, just like Elijah's.
1 year later, the Olympus Stadium. The band is new, the crowd is ecstatic, the night is alive. The kiss cam begins its cheerful, familiar sweep. It lands on a young couple who blush and share a sweet, innocent kiss, and the crowd roars its approval. But deep in the heart of the crowd, a single figure doesn't cheer. He stands perfectly still, a void in the sea of joy. A gaunt, hunched man wearing an old technician's jacket and oversized headphones. In his hands, he cradles a small, glowing control panel. His face is a mask of shadow, but on the screen of his device, the live feed of the happy couple is clear.
With a calm, deliberate motion, he moves his thumb on the joystick. The view on his small screen pans away from the happy couple and begins to scan the rest of the crowd, hunting, searching for the next flicker of betrayal, the next secret love that needs to be dragged into the light. Because the show must always go on.